Would you dare to enter a house where fear itself is said to live? What if what follows you isn't a ghost, but something unseen and unexplained? And can anyone truly escape a place that doesn't drive visitors away, but reveals who they really are? Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. This is The Spook House by Ambrose Bierce, a classic tale reimagined in English, wrapped in darkness and mystery. Before we dive in, subscribe for your daily stories. Now, let's go. The road that cuts north from Manchester toward Boonville was never busy, even in wartime, but there was a stretch of it, about 20 miles out, where travelers unconsciously quickened their pace. Long before the house burned, people avoided that bend in the road. Back in 1862, a plantation house stood there, wooden, solid, and noticeably finer than anything around it. It didn't belong in that landscape, and somehow it knew it. By the time the fire finally erased it a year later, the house had already been abandoned for nearly half a decade. No doors were locked, no windows boarded. Nature had claimed the land with quiet aggression. Thorny vines strangled the fields, fences had vanished plank by plank, and the scattered outbuildings sagged like tired men left to rot. Locals took what they needed: wood for warmth, boards for repair, never hiding their theft, never bothering to come at night. No one came after dark. Daylight made the place merely ugly. Night turned it into something else. People didn't call it by its real name anymore. They called it the Spook House, not as a joke, not as a rumor, as a fact. Everyone agreed on what lived there. The spirits were not distant whispers or imagined shadows. They were said to move, to speak, to show themselves. This belief was held with the same certainty as Sunday sermons delivered by traveling preachers. No one questioned either. The owner of the house had never denied the stories, only because he never returned to deny anything at all. One night, without warning, he vanished. So did his wife, 3 daughters, a son, a baby still in arms. 7 people erased in a single night. They left everything behind: food on the shelves, clothes in the closets, horses still in the stable, cattle wandering the fields. Even the workers' quarters stood as they always had. Nothing was stolen, nothing disturbed, nothing missing, except a man, a woman, 3 girls, a boy, and an infant. After that, no one needed convincing. A place where 7 human lives could disappear without a sound was a place no one dared to visit once the sun went down. It happened on a humid night in June, years before the house earned its name. 2 men were traveling the lonely road between Boonville and Manchester, pushing their horses harder than they should have. Colonel J.C. McCardle, a lawyer by trade, and Judge Myron Vey of the state militia had business they considered too urgent to delay. Darkness had already swallowed the countryside, and the air carried the low, restless growl of an approaching storm. Still, they pressed on. The storm caught them at the worst possible place. As thunder cracked overhead and lightning tore open the sky again and again, the silhouette of the plantation house rose before them, silent, waiting. The rain broke just as they reached it, sheets of water driven sideways by wind. Lightning came so frequently it felt almost steady, illuminating the ruined gate and guiding them into a collapsing shed where they secured their horses and stripped the harness in haste. Soaked and impatient, they crossed the yard and knocked. Once. Then again. No answer. They shouted, but the storm devoured their voices. Assuming no one could hear over the chaos, they tried the door. It swung inward without resistance. They stepped inside, and everything stopped. The thunder vanished. The rain ceased. The lightning, moments ago relentless, might as well never have existed. Darkness closed around them, complete and absolute. No crack of light entered through the windows, no echo of the storm reached their ears. The world outside had been erased in a single step. For a heartbeat, McArdle was convinced the lightning had struck him dead at the threshold, that this silence was death itself. Then, sensation returned. He realized his hand was still gripping the doorknob, though he had no memory of closing the door. Instinctively, he decided to test himself, to step back into the storm and confirm that he could still see, still hear, still live. He turned the knob, pulled. The door opened, but it did not open into the night. It opened into another room. Not the rain, not the yard, not the world they had just left. Another room. And in that moment, McArdle understood with chilling clarity that they had crossed into a place where the rules of doors, and perhaps reality itself, no longer applied. The room beyond the door was dimly illuminated by a sickly green glow, faint yet pervasive, as though the light itself were breathing. McArdle could not tell where it came from. There was no lamp, no window, and yet the space was visible, clear enough to understand, blurred enough to deny comfort. Shapes emerged without edges. Details revealed themselves reluctantly. And then his mind grasped what it was seeing. The room was empty of everything except bodies. They lay scattered across the stone floor, 8, perhaps 10 of them. He never truly knew how many. Counting would have required a calm he did not possess. Their sizes varied disturbingly, from the smallest shape of an infant to the full length of grown men and women. Age, gender, none of it spared. Death had been thorough. Most of them lay motionless where they had fallen. One figure, a young woman by her outline, sat upright in the corner, her back pressed against the meeting of 2 walls, as if she had waited there for something that never came. Nearby, an older woman cradled a baby against her chest, arms locked in a final, futile embrace. A boy, not yet a man, lay face down across the legs of a bearded adult, as though collapse had overtaken him mid-crawl. Clothing clung to them in tatters. Some were nearly bare. A girl's hand still clenched a torn scrap of fabric at her chest, frozen in the act of panic or defense. The bodies were not newly dead. Faces had shrunk inward, limbs appeared too thin for their frames. In places, flesh had surrendered almost entirely, leaving bone exposed beneath skin that clung like parchment. Time had passed here. Too much time. McArdle stood at the threshold, unable to move, unable to breathe properly, horror rooting him in place. And yet, strangely, his thoughts refused to remain on the dead. Instead, his attention slipped away, fastening onto meaningless details, as if his mind were deliberately retreating from the truth before it shattered. He noticed the door in his hand. It was not wood. It was iron. Thick plates riveted together, cold and industrial, utterly out of place in a plantation house. Along its beveled edge, 3 heavy steel bolts were embedded, evenly spaced. Without understanding why, he turned the knob. The bolts slid back smoothly, vanishing into the metal. When he released it, they snapped outward again with quiet, mechanical certainty. A spring lock. He examined the inner face of the door. There was no handle. No knob, no latch, nothing, just a seamless sheet of iron. And in that moment, standing between a room of the dead and a door designed only to close, McArdle understood something far more terrifying than the sight behind him. This room had never been meant to be opened from the inside. As I stood frozen, my mind still clinging to the iron door and its impossible mechanics, a sudden movement jolted me from my reverie. Judge Vey, completely forgotten in the maelstrom of my own terror, pushed past me, stepping boldly into the room. "For God's sake!" I shouted, my voice cracking in panic. "Do not go in there! We must leave this place now!" He ignored me. Unshakable, fearless, he moved to the center of the room. There he knelt beside one of the bodies, inspecting it with a care that made my stomach twist. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted its blackened, shriveled head into his hands. Then it came, the stench, a choking, rancid odor that seemed to crawl along the walls, seep through the floor, and strike directly at my senses. My knees buckled, my head swam. I felt as if the world had been torn from beneath me. Desperate for stability, I grabbed the edge of the door and in my panic slammed it shut with a sharp, final click. After that, nothing. When I awoke, 6 weeks had passed. I was lying in a Manchester hotel room, brought there by strangers I could barely remember. My body had been consumed by a relentless nervous fever, my mind adrift in constant delirium. I had been found lying somewhere miles away from the house, but how I had escaped or even left it remained a mystery beyond my grasp. The first coherent thought I managed was of Judge Vey. I demanded to know his fate, and the truth I was told, calculated, soothing, and carefully measured, was that he was safe, at home, perfectly unharmed. Only then did I realize they had been trying to shield me from something I was not yet ready to face. And even now, recalling it, the memory of that room, that door, that smell, chills me to the bone. No one believed me. And who could? After all, what rational mind could accept a tale like mine? I felt the weight of that disbelief crushing me, but nothing compared to the grief that awaited me when I returned home to Frankfurt 2 months later. Judge Vey, my companion, my friend, was gone. Never heard from again. Not a word, not a trace. That bitter truth made every day since my recovery feel like a punishment. I cursed the pride that had silenced me, the stubborn refusal to insist on the truth when all the world dismissed my words as madness. The events that followed, the examination of the house, the failure to find a room like the one I had described, the attempts to declare me insane, and my eventual vindication, are already well known to readers of The Advocate. Yet even after all these years, I remain convinced that the secret of Judge Vey's disappearance, and perhaps the fate of the vanished occupants of that long-abandoned house, still lies buried, waiting to be uncovered. I have neither the legal authority nor the wealth to excavate it, but I have not abandoned hope. One day, perhaps, the truth will be revealed, and it grieves me still that progress has been stymied by the undeserved hostility, the skepticism, and the obstinate disbelief of those who loved the late Judge Vey. Colonel McCardle passed away quietly in Frankfurt on December 13, 1879, yet the story and the unanswered questions it leaves linger on, a shadow that refuses to fade.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.